Hey guys, welcome to the Student Side Hustle. So in this show, what we're trying to do is, I'm trying to share stories of individuals and people who generally are doing something unique, doing something entrepreneurial, doing something that they're passionate about and trying to make it their career. That's not necessarily the thing that allows you to be on the show or qualifies you to be a guest on the show, but that's generally what we're talking about. We're talking about entrepreneurship, passion, etc. A lot of it revolves around bodybuilding and fitness because that's what I'm personally interested in. But what I want you to take away from this is just the fact that you can do whichever passion that you'd like to do, and you can make that into a career. It's a long path, but you can make it happen. And basically what I'm doing is showing you 80 plus examples of people who are doing it and who have done it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I would love if you would subscribe because we've got a lot of new episodes coming out. And yeah, thank you so much for listening.
People are constantly raising the bar.
Sacrifices need to be made.
What would you guys say are your biggest weaknesses?
You or your enemy right now?
The success of life.
Just a fucking podcast.
I hear you're making branched chain amino acids out of your hair.
I literally just cleaned up. Yeah, so I knew I was going to. I had shaved my head in the past, like not down to skin. I don't know that I'm ready to do that yet, but and it's kind of receding, so and it's just frustrating to style it.
Same here.
Yeah, it happens, man. It's part of aging.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I feel like all it weirdly seems like a lot of lifters seem to be bald.
It tends to be pretty common in lifters. It does seem.
Do you think that's correlated? Are we all going to go bald?
It's very genetic. There's also really skinny dudes who never touched a weight who also go bald. It's just it seems that it's very genetic, and it doesn't discriminate. But yeah, I've been playing around with doing it again, and I wanted to see if there was actually like a procedure that I could find. So the other night I was looking. I just wanted a good reason beyond just like, I'm just fucking frustrated, I'm going to shave my head. So I found a procedure, and it's actually pretty simple. The only thing that I just found out is that I only got like 1.5 grams of hair from what I cut. So the problem is I'm probably going to need to collect it for a while to get enough to actually yield a significant amount.
Could you use other people's hair?
I could.
Can I send you my hair?
That would be awesome. I was actually thinking of going to the like local barber shop and just asking them to give me a bunch of their hair.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I might do that still.
That's probably a bit more convenient.
Yeah. International.
I kind of want to shave my head as well because I get the whole can't be bothered styling it, and it's like if I'm gonna go bald anyway. But I don't know. I think I've just got a big forehead. I can't tell. But I think it's going back. No clue.
So everybody loses some as they age. Like whether you'll go completely bald or not is a genetic thing. Like if you have both parents, especially. So if your mom's side and your dad is bald, it's very high. Like for example, my dad and all of his brothers are basically cue balls. But my mom's side, everybody had a full head of hair until they died. So, but I have a brother too. I have an older brother who's 2 years older, and I'm progressing in the exact pattern that he was. And he's not bald; he's just thinning.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, the bottom line is like, even if I do something about it, you have to shave your head anyway for like the procedures. But I'm not fucking worried about it. Whatever. I got other fish to fry.
What procedure? Is it a surgical procedure?
So like they'll do transfers where they'll take follicles from the back of your head where you don't lose them, and they'll move them. Yeah. So you can like, yeah. But it's expensive. It's not covered. You're basically chasing your hairline. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do. But either way, I was like, okay, if I could do something positive and scientific with it, then I'm gonna go that route. So. Anyway.
I just watched it now and I was just like, what?
So
would you drink the BCAAs at the end?
I don't know. And the only reason for that, not because I'm skeeved out by my hair, more so that I have to use quite a bit of chemicals to do the extractions.
Right.
And I don't have sophisticated enough equipment to know that I've removed everything.
Okay. So this isn't going to be the next, like, Denovo supplement.
No, I'm not making a product from this.
No.
But, I mean, the reality is that that's where the starting materials are for branched-chain amino acids that are sold on the supplement market. They either come from feathers or they come from human hair.
Like
Yep.
bird feathers or something. Well,
Yep.
I guess who else has feathers? That's,
Yep.
That's weird. Do you feel like...
So it's weird. Like, if people are bothered by it and they drink BCAAs, they don't even realize that they're being hypocrites.
Denovo doesn't sell any BCAAs, though.
We don't. We had BCAAs in Epoch, but they're very expensive. There's really limited data for the application of them. So it just wasn't justified, and Epoch was already such a big formula. Like, it was the previous version of Ignite, and it was like the size of a protein scoop because there were so many actives in it, and it cost us a lot. It cost us like almost $20 a unit to make, which is a lot. Most supplement companies would never make a product that's that expensive. So it just got harder to justify, and it made more sense to split a formula like that into more specialized sub-formulas.
Yes.
So basically, Ignite became a more direct pre-workout formula rather than trying to be like a catch-all, meaning like a pre-workout, a creatine formula, and a pump formula.
Yeah.
So we'll have a creatine product that's more standalone. And the advantage of that is you can, of course, dose things better when they're a standalone product. Like if you have 3 actives, it's easier to make a really good formula with 3 or 4 actives versus trying to make a really good formula with 20 actives.
Is there anything... Because I know pretty unanimously, I hear people say, just take creatine monohydrate, 5 grams a day, nothing else. Would you guys just do that, or would you guys add something else in there, or would there be a reason to add something else?
That was the real snag of coming out with the creatine product again, was we're not going to do it if we can't basically do it de novo, which is innovate somehow, make it unique, improve upon something that's already out there. So for a long time, we were just not going to make a creatine product. And then I started digging and just reading more and more and looking at potential. I never stopped looking at potential options when I'm formulating. My mind is always wide open to anything that might be a new trend or a new technology of where they can extract certain things. So I started finding more and more about nitrates, and I had read about nitrates about a year and a half ago, and we were going to put them in another version of Epoch in the past. I was going to use sodium nitrate. The problem is sodium nitrate is what they use in preserving meats, and there's a lot of consumer concern over sodium nitrate just because they have in the past linked it with like increased risk of stomach cancer and stuff like that.
Right. Do you think it's founded? Are those founded concerns?
Well, I've read the stuff. I don't remember what the shortcomings were, but there's a lot of hesitance to accept those findings when they were. This is quite a few years ago, I think. However, with food-derived nitrates, they haven't found those correlations.
Right.
And nitrates are abundant in like fruits and vegetables, the things that the only thing everybody agrees are good for you. So the advantage of nitrate is it's a direct precursor to nitric oxide, the vasodilator. What happens with nitrates is in the stomach, they're converted to nitroso compounds, which are free radicals, basically. And that's where they found the risk with stomach cancer.
Right.
Current formulas on the market, they will include an antioxidant with nitrates, and they found 2 benefits of that. One is it eliminates the risk Two is that it preserves the spike in nitric oxide production.
Right.
So you basically get, like for example, if you gave someone nitrate orally, they will get a response for a short period of time and then it'll dip off really quick. Whereas if you give an antioxidant with it, they will continue to have that response over time. It will be like they won't adapt or they won't upregulate other systems to break down the nitrates really quick. So now I need to rewind to the question. So I kept looking. I found this one version of nitrate, which was, all right, again, sorry, let me back up. So the current accepted and most research validated form of nitrate for performance is beetroot juice. That's where all of the research came from with endurance athletes. And it makes sense because basically the mechanism is you increase nitric oxide, you vasodilate, you get better perfusion of tissue with blood, and then you get an improvement in VO2 max. So it makes sense. You're basically feeding more oxygen to tissues. So you can do all the metabolic processes that create energy in a muscle. So I had looked at beetroot powder for a while. Problem with beetroot powder is it's like 2% nitrate. So if you want to get enough a dose of nitrate by using beetroot, you need to use like 30 grams. At that point, it tastes like chalk. It's real gritty. It's just gross. You can't mask it. It turns the solution this like ugly dark red or brown. So that was a limitation. So now this is probably about a year and a half ago I was looking at this. Then I looked at sodium nitrate. I was able to source some. The only places I could source it was chemical companies, like basically for research use only companies.
Right.
So that was a limitation. And then the links with, or the concerns with the public with stomach cancer, I was like, fuck, we can't put this in a product. This is a huge limitation. Even if I can validate it, there's too much public. It's just like trying to prove to the general public that organic means nothing. It's already cemented in their minds that this is, a bad thing.
Do you feel like that's pretty damn common? It's like, for instance, people are still like deathly scared of salt. Like they just don't want any salt. They think salt's going to kill them. Like they don't even understand the water regulation sort of properties of salt.
Yeah. Well, you have to look at it as what reasoning point are people, what foundation I look at the average person who's in fitness or the general public, they have no educational background in really any physiology. So they're educated on the news and media and marketing. So basically the product you get is their understanding of something is similar to a pinball and a pinball machine. They're just getting bounced back and forth of whatever the experts say.
Right.
And the problem is the experts
are specific gurus, or
well, there's that, or the expert is funded by the organization that has a vested interest in not overhauling their entire paradigm that they've focused upon for the past 40 or 50 years. That's why there's the adoption in lower carbohydrates are not requiring such an abundance of carbohydrate in the diet is still a controversial thing because there's so much vested interest, and the American Heart Association has put so much time and money into funding that you're asking an entire medical industry to overhaul. And you look at even just the average person after they're out of school or they're in practice and making money, most people don't want to keep trying to find reasons they're wrong. They just want to find reasons that they're still right. In the least effort possible. So anyway, let me just finish that line of thought. So I kept digging for nitrates, saw the limitation with beetroot, couldn't use it. Thought about complementing beetroot with some other form of potassium nitrate. They make creatine nitrate. There's a company called Thermolife who has the patent on all amino acid nitrates like creatine, citrulline, that they sell to Cellucor. I reached out to them. their minimums are so huge that they stopped answering me when I told them what amount we wanted to buy. So that line was cut off. Then I found there's two sources of nitrate that are much higher. Two food sources that are much higher than beets. One is red spinach. Another one is arugula. Again, both vegetables, both healthy vegetables. Found a supplier for red spinach extract, like 9% nitrate, really high. I could dose it appropriately. Tested it. It mixed well in solution. It was easy to flavor over, but it would have cost us just for that ingredient alone $30 a unit. That our price.
That's
So no way
that's
to
your
get that.
going price for every single product, right?
Well, the problem is we would lose money if
Yeah.
we sold it at $30 a unit.
Yeah.
Like that's just obviously not possible. So when we get the connection error, you can still hear me. Okay, do I cut out?
Somewhat, yes, but it's not too bad.
Okay. I might try to move a little closer to my router if
Yeah.
it continues to be a problem.
Sounds good.
So this is how formulation works for me. Is I never abandon something. I keep a list of everything I want to use, and I'll just, whenever I get the chance, I'll dig and see if I could find some other route or some other way of doing it. So it's like, I think what I like about it so much is it's a creative challenge. Like it challenges me to find new ways to do things, or do things that someone else tries to cut me off on, and then I can find a workaround, which that is exciting.
It's the kind of
So-
thing where it's quite like, it's kind of frustrating to think that, okay, one company can have all the patents on all those ingredients. It's like, that seems kind of fucked up to me, but because it's kind of like those are compounds, like I don't think they should be, like, they should sort of be open to anyone. Like if someone copies the exact formulation of Utopia, then it's like, okay, that's fucked up. But it's like, the copying one ingredient is just like, like,
Well, so the reason that a company like them can get away with it is those are lab-made compounds. Like creatine nitrate does not exist in nature, nor does creatine or citrulline nitrate.
right.
So that's how they can get their little corner and patent it. Whereas if it was made in a plant, it wouldn't be patentable.
Is it patented forever? Like, can anyone ever get a hold of it?
A patent usually has a lifespan of 20 years. That's why when you see a drug come out on the market, that drug company has 20 years to make their profit or their money back on it before that can be sold and made by every knockoff. That's why now you see things like Walmart brand Advil or so-and-so brand drug. So you have 20 years to recoup your costs or make profit.
Right.
I don't even know how I stumbled upon it, but I found this manufacturer who makes an arugula extract that's even higher. It's like 10% nitrate. Got samples. It's affordable, so we can do it. So we have now it's going to be creatine mono we're using. We're using a source of really high nitrate that we can dose appropriately. That's not a huge protein scoop size. We're going to use tart cherry extract, which you may have heard of for muscle damage and stuff.
Right.
And then a little bit of vitamin C. So basically, it's
Recovery.
Progression of creatine, where you use it intra-workout, you will get endurance benefits, you will get recovery benefits, and you get the benefit of creatine.
Right. So then, would it be like sort of, does it enhance the effects of creatine? Does it sort of complement it, or how would the sort of sub ingredients work alongside creatine? Because with the vasodilation,
so there's really no way to enhance the effect of creatine because companies have been trying to do it for a really long time.
and it just goes into the muscles, sits there, does its job.
Basically, right. So once you saturate, you can't really super saturate.
Yeah.
So once you've done that, no matter what form you've done it through, you're not getting an added benefit of creatine. There's been, people have debated, for example, making the nitrate salt. There is some evidence to say that when you bind creatine to nitric acid, you do get some formation of basically an increase in nitrous oxide or nitrate in the blood, and you get the benefit of creatine. But here's the problem. Whenever you bind creatine to something else, if you're using the same dose, you get less pure creatine. Does that make sense?
Right, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for example, if I gave you, let's use just any salt, like let's use table salt as an example of salt dosings. If I give you sodium chloride, which is a 50-50 salt, your yield of pure sodium is not exactly.
Yeah.
So if we give you creatine hydrochloride versus creatine anhydrous will yield you more creatine.
Right.
Versus
anhydrous meaning
there's no water attached to
Okay.
it. So you either have monohydrate, which has one water attached to it, or you have anhydrous, which is water free.
right.
But if this part goes out and it's part of the podcast, no one should be concerned or be trying to get anhydrous, because the thing is, you will pull water from the air with creatine and it will become monohydrate if you just let it sit out. So there's no point in trying to find anhydrous.
So it's kind of like a joke. It's like you can't really.
There's a reason that monohydrate is the most used, because
Right.
it's feasible, the shelf life's sustainable. It is the most backed one. There's literally decades of creatine has been they started researching creatine in the early 1900s. So this isn't some new, it came out commercially in the 80s, but
Yeah.
they were studying it in the 1900s. Great was the chemist in the early 1900s, isolating creatine from rabbit muscles.
From rabbit what?
Rabbit muscle.
Right. And
Yep.
would you guys would be using monohydrate?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the reason we'll use monohydrate is we're going to actually have a fluid recommendation that it correlates with the water solubility of creatine. So it is true that a salt will dissolve better. A salt that is more polar will dissolve better in water. So creatine hydrochloride is more polar than monohydrate. So it will dissolve better in water on a gram per gram basis. That's true. However, you run into a couple problems with that. Number one is creatine hydrochloride is more expensive. Number two is when you dose it right. So if you use hydrochloride to yield the same amount of pure creatine as monohydrate, you're making a very acidic solution.
Right.
Because that hydrochloride basically in
Comes
water
with
it
chloride.
splits. Right. So you're getting some hydrochloric acid in there.
Oh shit.
So here's the important thing to understand.
That balances out. It's not too bad. It's not like
Your stomach has a pH of 1.
Yes.
The reason you can digest proteins is because your stomach has hydrochloric acid, and that's what you
Okay. Fair.
hydrolyze
So,
protein.
but then going down your esophagus, would that be?
The biggest concern is the combination of, number one, taste, because acid will change sweetness and colors and other things. Number two is your teeth. That's why drinking soda and stuff will wear down your enamel. Acid wears enamel. There's just it's not even a debate. And the third thing is, yes, you can. I mean, you'd have to really go crazy. I don't think there's as much a case for it burning the lining of your esophagus, because vinegar is very acidic. It's a pH around 3. Lemon juice is a very low pH too. You can eat these things, like these fruits that are very acidic, and you'd be okay.
Yeah.
I think for me, or for me looking at it as a formulation perspective, is it really justifiable if we can achieve the water solubility? We can use an ingredient that's actually has more research backing, and we can make it taste right and not have to mask this huge acid load.
Yes. So it's like,
Because it is harder. It's harder to do. It takes more powder. So you're talking about a bigger and bigger and bigger scoop.
yeah, and you effectively do you want to keep the scoop as minimal as possible, keeping the effectiveness and not making it taste like shit.
I mean, the simplest principle when you're looking at making a powdered supplement is the least amount of solute, the better the solubility. So the less powder we use, the better chance we're going to get it to dissolve in water. That's a very general statement. If you use something that's very high solubility in water,
It'll just
you
dissolve.
can go up high doses. But in general,
it's better to have smaller. One thing
Yep.
I thought it was interesting that you talked about a while ago was nicotine. So, and this is something I've even been looking into a little bit. So, nicotine in the form of gum, I think you were talking about.
Yep. Yep.
And if you want to do any, like, I'm not a medical doctor sort of things.
I'm not, but whatever. I mean, I'm allowed to have an opinion, and it's not just me making shit up. Like, there is.
Okay.
I'm not a medical doctor. However, I'm also not just a random Joe Schmo off the street.
Exactly. Yeah. So, where do you see the benefit of? Because it was talking about stacking nicotine with Utopia.
Yep.
What would that do, and why, and when would you recommend it? Let's say if we. Well, first of all, should we touch on the negative effects of nicotine? How bad actually is just pure nicotine?
Okay, let me try to answer them all, and I'll do my best to do it in a linear fashion. So first off, nicotine is fairly unique. Structurally, I forget the class, but essentially it's an agonist of cholinergic receptors. Basically, cholinergic receptors have a lot of role in attention. There's some spillover in actually producing energy by increases in norepinephrine and basically adrenaline. But they're big on learning, attention, and memory. And anybody who smokes cigarettes knows that they get the buzz from nicotine. It's something notable. Now, cigarette is more than just nicotine. That's very important to note.
Yes.
So nicotine is recognized as an addictive compound. However, cigarettes are significantly more addictive than nicotine because there's other things in there.
Addiction-wise, what would be comparable, if that's even a thing you can do? Like, would it be comparable to caffeine or way different?
That's a good question. I don't have a great answer for that. I'm sure, I know it's been done of like the addictive tendencies of compounds. There's like a pie chart. And like, for example, the highest is like opioids.
Yeah.
Painkillers. And then lowest are usually like psychedelics. I don't know where nicotine falls within that realm, but it's not nearly as high as something like an opioid.
Yeah.
I want to say similar to something like caffeine, yes. I mean, I'm obviously an N of 1, but I've never had a problem with craving, nicotine gum, the next day, or like my use is very easily liberal. I'm not at all. I don't depend on it at all. But cigarettes are very different. So the point or the mechanistic reason why it makes sense to stack with something like Utopia for someone who wants more out of Utopia is the way that the formula for Utopia is designed is you provide a precursor to a neurotransmitter, and then you provide something else that either improves the absorption of that precursor or prevents the breakdown of the neurotransmitter itself. So, for example, the real core of the Utopia formula is providing precursor to increase the synthesis of acetylcholine, to increase synthesis of dopamine, and to I actually have a bottle right in front of me. I don't want to misquote myself. So primarily dopamine and acetylcholine are the real core neurotransmitters that Utopia is focusing upon. There's another one which is adenosine, which is the mechanism of caffeine, but that one isn't going to be as related to where nicotine fits in. So with the acetylcholine, we provide a source of a precursor for acetylcholine synthesis. With the huperzine, we provide a acetylcholine esterase inhibitor. So basically, we have a source of it, and then we have a source that prevents the breakdown.
Yes, so that's an enzyme, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Acetylcholine esterase enzyme. Yep. So by providing nicotine, you're providing a direct agonist of that receptor. So you will amplify the effects of everything in the formula by.
And then will the formula also amplify nicotine? So the benefits of nicotine on acetylcholine?
Yeah. Well, basically, you'd provide more acetylcholine. You'd provide a greater stimulation of those receptors, therefore a greater response. So if you feel a little something, that is largely like I found that just by using, and in the testing leading up to making Utopia, when I'd give people just acetylcholine alone, they tend to be more extroverted, more talkative. A couple other things I notice is it makes you sweat in very specific areas where you have a dense amount of cholinergic receptors, for example, like your armpits. So cholinergic stimulation will make you sweat in places like your armpits, like significantly more than usual. And that's something I notice as well when I stack it with nicotine. And then you'd get the amplification of like the tunnel effect as well.
So it's just like
that.
Do you think
Yeah, it's just
that
it's
combo
what
would
you
greatly
traditionally
enhance
feel.
deep work? So it's like, say you have an exam the next day and you need a study. If you stack that combo, could be pretty damn powerful.
So here's the thing: is I can't make a statement that that goes across the board, just because I think the thing that I continue to realize with formulating products is the diversity in response. Like there are some people that I know they're not making enough that they don't feel much from Utopia when they use it.
But some people it's like way too much because they're like, holy shit. Because there's how much caffeine in there?
200 milligrams.
Yeah.
So, and that's the same with coffee. Some people fall asleep when they have a cup of coffee. Some people get a lot of stimulation. Some people stimulation lasts for, like, even the half-life of caffeine, when they've studied it in a group of diverse individuals, there is no set amount of time. The range is like 3 hours to 7. That's a huge spread. So to expect that every single person is going to get the same exact response is not realistic. It's a bell curve, and you're trying to hit the biggest chunk of the bell curve. So I can say that when I've stacked both together, I've definitely felt a lot more stimulated. Definitely a lot more, and it's noticeable for me because I'm typically tend to be a lot more quiet. I'm definitely a lot more extroverted and verbal. And yeah, focus seems to be very, I don't have to try to focus in on something.
Right. Damn. That sounds like, damn, I need to get me some Utopia.
But I will say this, and this is, with everything I talk about, and this is probably the most important part to never lose sight of with anything I mention, is dose is everything. So I will always start at the most, and if they don't feel something, work up. You can always work up. You
rewind.
Work back.
Rewind like 10 seconds before you did dose.
I just said to always start at the most conservative low dose when adding something else, even when taking a new product, because you can always dose up. Once it's in your bloodstream, you can't dose back.
Yes.
And not that you're going to OD from this stuff, but it's always smartest from every possible angle to use the least you need to get the desired effect.
Yeah.
Because the more you use, the more accelerated you get the breakdown. Like, your body is a reaction vessel, and it's adaptive, meaning.
So if you do too much, do you think it could not, one, be overstimulating, but also reduce the effectiveness? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's just like the first time someone uses coffee, it doesn't it doesn't feel the same after you've been a habitual coffee drinker for a year. You get a response, but it's often not like the first cup you ever had.
Yes.
And you see that with pre-workout. People say, I used it and then I stopped feeling something after a period of time. Now, the problem is humans are not robots. They're not easily controlled subjects. So you have things like sleep, which are confounding variables in there. You have things like stress. You have things like use of other compounds that might accelerate the metabolism of that compound. Like even things like birth control will significantly, for females, will significantly change their ability to metabolize things like caffeine and anything that goes through that liver enzyme to primarily be metabolized. So there's so many things that will affect, your response. That's why when someone makes a statement like, I didn't feel it, or I stopped feeling it, or I don't feel that much, I just have a billion questions to ask them. It's not like, oh, it just doesn't work for you.
Yeah, so it's like there's a lot of context behind that. Not just, so it's like I know a lot of one time it was before an exam, and I gave my friends, while we were studying, I think, I gave them a caffeine pill, and they were like, oh, I feel like I'm going to fall asleep. And like two of them out of the 4 felt like they were going to fall asleep, and I'm like, okay. Like, I think they were already feeling that they were going to fall asleep though. So I was like, that's the thing. So is that a common thing? Is that...
So here's the thing to understand, that there's, in the field of pharmacology, there's 2 primary things that they're looking at. One is called pharmacokinetics, the other is called pharmacodynamics. Basically, pharmacokinetics is what the body does to the drug. Pharmacodynamics is what the drug does to the body. What that more specifically means is it encompasses metabolism, LADME, so liberation, absorption, digestion, metabolism, excretion. So that is basically things like half-life, how long the drug stays active in the body, what pathways are breaking it down, what route it's eliminated, whether the feces, whether sweat, whether saliva, whether urination. Liberation is more stuff like like for orally active drugs. So that's most of pharmacokinetics. Pharmacodynamics is what is this binding, like basically what's the mechanism? What is this binding with in the body to cause its response?
Yes.
So for example, like a drug like epinephrine, the reason an EpiPen works is it's a beta agonist. Beta agonists increase heart rate. They also open your airways. That's why they save your life if you're having anaphylaxis. So pharmacodynamics is basically going to explain why does this work? Why is it causing this subjective response? So for caffeine, there's actually a couple mechanisms, but the currently accepted primary mechanism is its interaction with adenosine receptors. Adenosine receptors basically are sensing how much free adenosine you have floating around in cells. It will accumulate typically throughout the day based upon breakdown of ATP. So the problem is caffeine is a competitive antagonist of adenosine receptors. So what that means is it will compete with the natural, what's called ligand. So basically, if you look at the lock and key model, the natural key for the adenosine receptor would be adenosine.
But caffeine's competing for that position.
Caffeine is competing because it has a similar structure to adenosine. But it's not, there's other things like suicide inhibitors. And so what that really means is caffeine can't dislodge adenosine once it's bound to that receptor. That's why if you wake up and you feel refreshed and awake, typically you will get a boost from caffeine. If you're tired, you undersleep, you don't clear a bunch of that adenosine, then you're not going to dislodge adenosine by providing caffeine. So it's not going to make you feel more awake if you already have fallen behind on sleep, or you've you're already tired, and then what's going to happen is you're going to get, once you crash, once that falls, then you're going to get from the crash of
So-
feeling even more fatigued and tired.
Do you feel like I feel like most students primarily would use caffeine pretty wrong then. So it's sort of like it's causing just damage, not really much good at all. I find when I get a good night's sleep and then I have like a monster before I study, it's like I can actually feel the benefits and I can actually like
Yep.
do it properly. But then if
Yep.
I'm just tired as fuck and I just have like a little coffee. Like the other day we were up like basically 48 hours in a row. We had 2 hours sleep because we were at this trail run and we were like helping the contestants. And I had like 3 or 4 coffees and didn't feel a single thing. And it was just like, I mean, I think I might have stayed awake, but it was just like, but I mean,
So-
when I tried to sleep, I couldn't though.
Here's the, yeah, so it's still doing something, but it might not be giving you the desired effect you want. So the problem is, and you actually highlighted that exactly, is most people will do what I would argue is the exact opposite thing they should do, meaning they will know that they're underslept, and then they will try to up the dose to still get the benefit. When the reality is the problem is the sleep hygiene and the schedule and all of those things. So now when you escalate the dose, you're moving so far in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Because you're going to accelerate the breakdown, this, for example, like the reason you get a tolerance when you drink alcohol is something called induction, which basically just means that when you provide something your body knows is not usually floating around or is not supposed to be floating around in a large quantity, you will increase production of enzymes that break it down. So the reason, if you start drinking and you drink large amounts regularly, you will have an improved tolerance is you start producing more of the enzymes that break down ethanol.
Right. And then
so
is
you
that
get that.
relatively reversible? Like,
It is reversible. So if you stop drinking, you will improve your tolerance.
what sort of time frame? And I'm assuming that varies between enzymes, but is there a general rule of thumb for compounds if you want to increase your tolerance or decrease your tolerance?
So that's where something like breaks will work. Like people say cycling stuff or taking, a caffeine break or something like that. It's a good idea. I truly believe that you should not become dependent on anything to make your day feel normal.
Yeah.
I think that's a problem. And I think if you're recognizing that that's happening, that's something that you should probably do something about. So really, when you need it, or it's not just, I kind of want to pick me up, I'm used to doing this, it's a habitual consumption thing. Now I realize that there's a very large quantity of daily coffee drinkers out there. And I'm not saying that people should stop doing that, but I do think like if you're having a gram of caffeine a day and stuff like that, and you're
fucking
continuing to
heaps.
depend,
Holy
there's people
shit.
that do that.
How much would
and you're
you
finding-
say is in a cup of coffee? Because I've heard 75 to 150.
Yeah, that tends to be the average, but it's actually like you can go anywhere from 75 to like 250.
Right,
Like there are some
okay.
really strong beans out there.
Okay. So it's more, I tend to think, oh, it must be 75 because my coffee's a week, I don't feel anything from it.
Yeah.
And then
Well, the process is going to affect the extraction of caffeine and the quantity in the drink too. So there are different ways that you can get more out of your coffee beans based on either the way they're brewing it or the way that you make it at home.
Do you think there's ever a place for that sort of 1 gram of caffeine? Like that's a fucking ton. Like not at one time, obviously, maybe throughout the day. Like say if someone has a really important day, would there be other probably more consistent compounds? Maybe like Ritalin or Adderall, would that be more useful if you're trying to, like say if you're a student and you really want to study, and you're like way behind and you've caught up on sleep, and then You want to make the most. You have one day in the year. That's the only day you're allowed to work.
I would never say blanket, yeah, 1 gram is appropriate. I'd say, like, if you find at the end of the day that you arrived at 1 gram and you got done what you needed to and you only dosed when you felt like you needed it, fine. I mean, it's not, these aren't life or death things. Like something like nicotine, nicotine actually has an extremely high toxicity. So, you know, like
that you wouldn't want to do. You wouldn't go anywhere near, definitely wouldn't go anywhere near a high dose on that.
No, it's you can. I mean, there's a reason that you can't usually buy straight nicotine, because it's pretty volatile, so it can become airborne easily. It can pass through the skin, and you can die from nicotine overdose. It's not a joke. I mean, like an active dose, it starts at 2 milligrams, which is tiny.
Yeah.
A tiny
and that
quantity.
would be one piece of gum or something like that, generally?
Yeah. Totally.
I may play around with the whole nicotine, because I find even when it comes to cigarettes, I don't get addicted whatsoever. Like, it's just sort of like every now and then, but I mean, it's not like fuck, I need one. Like, I've never, even when I was like 14, we would smoke cigarettes and I'd just be like, I don't get it. I don't really...
Well, I think the important thing to consider, though, is the relative safety margin of the dosing form you're using too. Because so basically, you consider you have thousands of compounds in a cigarette, whereas nicotine gum, the active,
just nicotine,
just straight nicotine.
Yeah, so it's almost like
you're talking about combusting versus just consuming.
Yeah,
right. So the way it's getting into your blood is very different, and you're talking about putting a flame to a bunch of compounds that most likely break down at different heats. So the dangerous part is, you might, you're going to volatilize nicotine and get it into your blood because you get the gas exchange in your lungs and it goes into the blood quick. Yeah. Fine. But you have thousands of other things that don't have the same stability as nicotine may. Whereas with gum, it's just the gum. Yeah. It's just nicotine.
And the method going in is sort of, I don't know what the word would be, natural in a way. Is that the wrong word, maybe? Like, we eat stuff all the time. We shouldn't smoke stuff, really. There's not really any situation where we should be breathing in gas.
You're going through a lot more trauma systems that are made to eliminate or reduce the exposure of dangerous things to all the cells in your body. I mean, that's basically the role of the gastrointestinal tract, and then the liver and the kidneys.
Yeah, so it's like there's a decent sort of defense mechanism. There's one thing I'd like to get your sort of thoughts on, and there's two sort of things that I've written down, but they sort of interplay quite a lot. So, in healthcare, I would say the biggest issue is obesity. Yet, at my university, we had a slide on how to treat obesity, and calories was not mentioned one time, not anywhere on the slide. Carbs, fat, protein, that's not even mentioned, nothing. It's just clean food. There's no mention, and like the clean foods don't even take into account calories. They don't even...
Oh boy.
And like it's like, and they compared, we were doing like a thing where we compared my diet to someone else's, and my diet that day was really bad. Like, it was classic horrible diet. It was like I had ice cream whey. Have I lost you? Hold up. I had like ice cream whey, 3 burgers from McDonald's, and then like a bunch of other shit. It was terrible. But then it's like, I mean, it was a pretty bad day. I mean, I had green beans at the end of the day. So, and then we compared it to someone else's diet who was like, oh, I had quinoa, chia seeds, blah, blah, blah. Like classic clean food. And everyone was like, fuck, your diet's so bad, James. But I was like, how come all of my health markers are fine? I do rigorous exercise. I mean, they did sort of mention like, okay, he does rigorous exercise like 5 times a week and controls. They didn't really mention calories, but it's just like, why? I mean, it's like obesity is such an issue. I feel like it's literally causing every single issue in healthcare. Like, genuinely, I don't think much else is causing any issues. It's just like acute injuries aren't exactly crippling the world, but it's like obesity seems to be literally causing everything, and it's for me personally, it fueled a massive pessimistic view around the world, a pessimistic view of the world, especially because I'm in fitness, and then I'm in evidence-based fitness. So it's like you see evidence-based fitness, which is like doing so well. You have so many great companies, and then you see outside and it's terribly trash and it's disgustingly horrible. And you compare, okay, there's this one small subset of people who aren't chasing money, doing it correctly. Like, for instance, with Denovo, you have a company that actually has morals and is doing things right. And then you have X, Y, and Z other company, and they sell BCAAs, they do dumb shit, they're selling fat burners. It's just like shit like that. They're just doing shit that doesn't fucking work, and that there's no morals behind it. And then you look at obesity, and healthcare is treating the symptoms of obesity primarily. It's just like, what the fuck? And then I think, especially for me, I don't know if we spoke about this on air or off air last time, but the whole Jordan Peterson thing, it was how he's very, very like, the world is in tyranny, we're descending into tyranny. There's other stuff I want to bring up, but I'll leave those things out because they're more political. And then I was looking at Steven Pinker's, it was one of his talks, and it was more his sort of talking about, hey, the world's not that bad. And I feel like he's generally correct apart from health, and it's just obesity. I feel like it generally feels like obesity is one of the few things in the world that's not getting better. Like, everything else seems to be getting better, but then health seems to be getting much, much worse, and just continuing to get worse. And it's just like, and we can't even agree on the cause. Like, you listen to a podcast on the debate on obesity, and it's like some people think it's because of high fat, some people think it's because of sugar, yet sugar intake's been going down. So it's just like, it's such a, it feels like such a confusing mess, and we can't even begin to grasp the solution to obesity.
Well, I guess I'd start in that it can be a very complex problem if you make it. But I think the most effective modality in treating and making a difference with things like obesity is find the lowest hanging fruits, which are the things that are easiest for people to do, that they can change and get the largest return on doing. And one of them is, in general, is moving more. And the other one is controlling calories. And yes, a way that you can achieve that is by eating more nutrient dense, high volume foods. When I say nutrient dense, I mean micronutrient dense, obviously not calorically dense. And that does tend to be eating like a hunter-gatherer. But we have so many things now in the world that work against that, meaning like convenience and corporations. Everywhere you walk, you're being thrown an option to eat at. And even if you're not thinking about eating, you have all these fast food and restaurants pumping the smell into the air. So you're getting all of these biological cues that make it almost impossible. Like, if you're not focused upon, or you're only relying on, I feel hungry now, or your hunger cues to eat, it's very easy to overconsume. Like, we have made it so insanely simple to overconsume that now, whereas before, we, way further back, probably in our history, starvation was a huge threat to survival. Now it seems like the opposite is a bigger threat to survival, which is overconsumption. And that speaks to like the efficacy of our industrial development. Like, that's great. We've made, all these things available on a huge convenient scale, but I think one of the problems is, as a market and economy or country seems to grow, at least in America, it seems that the norm seems to be we highly value business things and consumers over being rational, practicality,
general health and well-being.
Right. So there's going to be this fight then of what the commonly accepted thing is, because so much of the message is based upon funding, and funding in advertisement will reach a much broader audience than a logically speaking person. Well, let's use someone like Jordan Peterson, and let's just remove whether you think his message is good or bad. He has obviously struck a chord that resonates with a large amount of people, that he's become very mainstream and popular. Does that mean he's the most rational and the most logical person out there? Doesn't. Yeah. It just means he's the most broad and well received for whatever reason now, because his message is very relevant.
Yes.
And that applies in things like fitness. The loudest voice doesn't necessarily mean it's the most correct voice. It's the one that's reached the most amount of people at the most appropriate level. Yeah. So they all can do something with that message. So like his 12 rules, whatever book, there's nothing in there that's mind-blowing or groundbreaking. Yeah.
It's just like it's needed.
Massively successful because he's taken the message and he's taken it from highbrow technical and watered it down so every single possible person can understand it.
So it's just like, and I think that's the thing with I don't get why, and I'm kind of getting, because I remember last time we talked, it was like I was sort of looking for a reason to find a hole in his argument, and I think I've like sort of found one now. It's like and I think, I don't know, I think it was you who originally told me sort of how he sort of appeals a lot to like your fear, like he's sort of very like he'll sort of make things sound very catastrophic and very like dangerous. And I mean, for the most part, I agree with a lot of what he says, but it's like I can definitely see how he sort of I think it's just people twist it unnecessarily though, and then that makes the people on the right think, oh, he's not bad at all. There could be nothing bad about his message. The people on the left think he's Hitler. So it's like everyone anywhere doesn't actually know where he is. Like, for instance, I don't know if you heard about the New Zealand shooter. Like, I think he was mentioned in there or something. Like, the shooter must have mentioned him or something to do with that. And then a New Zealand company banned his book, like 12 Rules for Life. And it was just like, we still sell Mein Kampf. But like 12 Rules for Life, that was just a bit like, what? And then and it's just like, I feel like people, especially a lot of people, will sort of stick in their sort of opinion, and they'll never sort of think, okay, how can I prove this wrong? Like, even as you said with I think it was the formulation, it was more like, why can't I prove this wrong? Why can't I see, is there a better option? Like, especially if you look in fitness, it's rampant. It's just like people have their thing.
I think it's tough because we're all approaching, especially social problems, we're all approaching them from very different angles because we don't have a unified perception, and that's a good thing, especially if we want to be individuals and not become what he mentions is like part of some tyrannical, or dictatorship. I think that's good. I mean, he has freedom of speech, so does everybody else who opposes him. That's need that to, I think, get the best endpoint out. But I kind of lost my train of thought. What was the last thing you ended on? What was the last thing you said?
I'm not sure. Do you think mindsets that he sort of creates, or the general mindset of pessimism around the world? I don't know if it's pessimism, because he generally does say the world is pretty good. That's better than it's ever been.
Oh, this is what I was going to say. Your personality and your upbringing also is going to very much affect your how you receive and perceive the world, and that's obviously going to affect your opinions, your judgments, your views, everything like that. I think in presenting something, he is a provocateur, and I think in presenting something that can be an exposed nerve for many, or a very hot topic, or a very hotly debated thing, you are challenging people to think and to question their views and their own judgments. And most people, it's just like asking why the average person doesn't powerlift or bodybuild or CrossFit or do marathons. It's like there is a large investment of energy in that, and it's way easier to just rely on how you feel about an issue and never question it, and then just defend it to the death.
Yes.
And I'd love to believe in an idealistic world that everybody arrives at their viewpoints based on these logically, this logical progression that can be tied to some kind of fundamental root that, is objective and very logical. That's my one. Number two is that's asking people to invest a lot of energy in thinking, in really thinking about all the good and the bad of the world. And I think a lot of people, why is he popular? Because he's
exactly
doing
what people want.
He's giving people conclusions without having to do the thinking.
Right.
And
yes.
I don't necessarily think that's dangerous, because ultimately it's up to you to determine if you think he's right or wrong. He's putting the opinion out there. Just like someone who is directly opposed to his view is putting it out there, which would be, someone can say,
maybe Sam Harris, or
a very liberal person.
Yeah.
And it's just like saying we should have one party of politics. That would end up being a very bad thing. And you do. Right. Or it becomes a dictatorship. So I think it's challenging. And I do agree with what I've heard said a lot, which I think Sam Harris has said, and even people like Stephen Hawking have said, is like, we have to keep having conversations.
Yes.
Because the only time it stops is when the conversations stop and the alternative viewpoints don't get out there and stop, and we start avoiding the things that make us feel uncomfortable talking about. Like those are dangerous points, because you allow one very strong opinion to take over. And it becomes oppressive.
And I think it's quite dangerous to fully, because I think a lot of people get sort of, I don't want to use the word indoctrinated, but it kind of feels like it fits, like with Jordan Peterson. It's like especially young men in my demographic who are ambitious, and then they're usually already sort of tilting relatively right. It's like they're already sort of feeling this, and I mean, it feels kind of founded, the sort of hate against white men today. It feels like that's relatively occurring. Like I was at dinner.
Well, you have to consider that I think anything that comes up socially is usually in response to something else that came up socially. So I think it's undeniable that there is a huge movement of women empowerment. And I think because that has become popular, the natural response is for someone like Jordan Peterson to become popular to almost counter that. It's always, you always have these two, let's just call them forces that are to use politics. I think Trump was the natural response to Obama being in office for 2 terms. I just think that that's just the way. By something happening for an extended period of time, it's, I don't know if I'd say empowering, but it's building a tension with another group that feels that they are they're not being heard.
Right. And do you feel like he's sort of swooped in at a good time and an opportune time for him to sort of.
I think he's very smart. It's undeniable that he's intelligent. I think, and again, this is now my infusion of my opinion with it. I think there's definite massive potential for manipulation there. I'm not saying that I think he is manipulating people, but obviously he has motives beyond just trying to educate people.
Yeah.
All of his content is out there. He has lots of Patreon. He's always on TV. He has a very massively popular YouTube channel. He's putting out tons of content. He's definitely doing something beyond just his spoken motive.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm ready to pin that to what that is, but
I think many of us can. Well, I mean, I think he gets a bad rap generally, but maybe I think he takes that bad rap and uses that bad rap as, look at how bad everyone else is. So it's like, he'll take I'm getting a bad rap unfairly, and then
being
take
controversial is one of the easiest ways to stay relevant.
Yeah.
Making friends does not get you tons of attention unless you have a huge skill beyond that gets you a lot of attention.
Yeah. Do you think he's gunning for something like Prime Minister, President sort of thing?
That's really hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I think that would be... because I think even with Trump, we've headed into the age where now the influencers have much, much, much more power than anyone else. And it's like they control, like, they can literally become president if they want to. Like, someone like Kanye, it's like it's not unreasonable to assume that he could potentially become president if he played his cards right. It's like, that could happen. So it's like, like, that's the thing. And I think it's quite interesting, the fact that that's even possible. And I think especially with Jordan Peterson, it's like he has pretty much every like characteristics of a politician. Like, when he speaks, it looks like if you took, like, have you seen the video of him? It's at like it was one of when he first became popular, one of the Bill C16 C16 sort of rallies, and he was there, and they like got rid of the speaker, so he had to shout to get the message what he's saying to his like fans. And it's like when he was talking, it was just like, holy shit, like that is
so
if you respond to that message, you would feel emotional.
Here's I think everybody has a method of maybe how they determine what the truth is at the root of anything that's coming out of people's words or speeches or interviews or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think one of them for people who are public figures is pay attention to where they draw their lines of what topics they feel comfortable putting themselves in the position of expert as.
Yes.
And I think once that line starts to blur or disappear, I think it becomes more and more concerning.
Because then it's like they're a guru of all-knowing sort of thing.
Well, right. They start to become... it's almost like they start to believe that they're omnipotent, and that's dangerous. That is a dangerous point. And there have been points where I've seen him talk about things that are very clearly outside his realm of expertise. And those are some of the things that I think could be red flags. I've seen... Most of the stuff I've seen have been his lectures, where he's actually lecturing in kind of psychoanalysis, psychology stuff. But when you see his more public talks, or even sometimes some of those lectures, they start to really bleed out into, a more infusion of personal opinion.
Yes.
I will say this. When he came to Philadelphia, I went, and I was pretty shocked. There were two things that I was shocked by. Number one is the people who came out before him very much felt like political activists who were very right-winged. Like, they were very much trying to incite the crowd. Everything they were saying was very infused with kind of right-wing ideology.
Yeah.
and like the first thing he came out and said was like he's not right wing, which was odd, and I noticed it very clearly. So it was fascinating. Like I think he has interesting things to say. I think there is value in a lot of what he says, but I think to blindly accept everything without question is
just
dangerous.
because he says one thing correctly doesn't mean everything he says is correct. Like when I saw him, I noticed a similar thing, that he didn't have any speakers before him, but he did have like, you'd notice he would just be going through the normal thing, like he just goes through the 12 rules and then all that, but then the things that people responded to were either something in regards to the 12 rules, and the demographic there was quite interesting to me. I found it was pretty damn wide, but majority white, and majority there were like other races there, but it was majority white. I'd say probably I was expecting it to be my demographic. There was definitely a significant amount of my demographic there, but I reckon it was only like 20%, like young white male.
So here's the funny thing is, like, when you go to anything like that, you are seeing kind of somewhat of an echo chamber, because I've seen Sam Harris too, who I think people would consider maybe on the opposite side. And both places you see, it's not very common someone's going to buy a ticket who completely disagrees with that person's point. And you get the largest response, and this is just a human, I don't even know if I call it a human error, it's a human phenomenon, is you get the largest response with the emotional appeals. With things that, because emotional is universally understandable. Science is not, because not everybody has the technical prerequisites to understand high-level science. Whereas everybody understands the emotions because everybody feels them. So everybody knows what anger feels like. Everybody knows what it feels like to feel lied to, betrayed, fear, happy, sad, like all of those things. So when you can make those appeals, those are also the people who tend to rise to the top fastest. Because again, that there's no prerequisite of understanding to get their message, or they'll pepper in, like they'll do some highbrow technical stuff and then pepper in the emotional thing to where it keeps these people hanging on. And it's like, they sound smart. Yes, I can win this argument. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he definitely made a lot of those. Like the things that got responses were like, the New Zealand media had a few really terrible portrayals of him, and there was one guy who had quite a good portrayal. He was very on his side, and then the New Zealand like standard media was okay, but they did play a lot on the whole like, oh, he's a racist, oh, he's a sexist, and they did do that a lot, and he played on that. So he took the fact that they were reporting him badly and just making the joke that none of them have even read his book, sort of thing. And then that sort of got the biggest response, I'd say. Like that would always be get people sort of clapping, get people saying like, oh yeah, like that's the thing that got people involved. And then some of the other stuff, like people would zone out and you wouldn't see people really like.
There's an interesting book that I read a couple of years ago. It was called Propaganda, and it's written by Edward Bernays, and it's short, and it's basically this guy who was involved. He kind of started the field of public relations, which is basically marketing agendas or propaganda as it's sort of known. And one of the things he makes is like, and this is at the time where there were more, it was the media we consumed was more lectures and newspaper and stuff, but he said which will get a larger attendance, a lecture or a debate. Always going to be a debate, because people want to see that tension, and that it's just like, why does drama on TV always get viewership? It's just a fundamental part. It's like, or people say like it's the train wreck thing where you can't look away. It's just part of human nature.
And that was the fucked up thing. I think many people in New Zealand. Did you hear about the Christchurch shooting?
The what?
There was like a shooting in Christchurch. It was like the biggest.
I did.
It was like 9th biggest in the world or something.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in New Zealand had that sort of fucked up urge to watch it, or the fucked up urge because it was live streamed on Facebook, which is fucked up.
Well, I think they said like everybody watched it for 20 minutes past after it happened, and then they reported it. So it was no one reported it until after it was over. That's
Really?
a crazy, yeah. At least that's what Facebook said from the stats.
Fucking hell.
So again, I think the important highlight here is to think of what can you take away from that, which is that these are potentially things that these are sensitive things that most people don't want to acknowledge or talk about. But if we just keep tampering them down or pretend that they're not something that's written into who we are, I think that's even more dangerous. And I don't think that means people are inherently evil. I just think that means that, well, for example, if you go to someone's house with a gun, do you expect them to welcome you and invite you in for dinner? You know what I mean? Like there are, there's just parts that are hardwired in of being territorial and being tribal, and these are parts that we share with mammals.
Do you think that's some of the bits that Jordan Peterson gets relatively correct?
Yeah,
like,
I think
like the whole difference between men and women. That's like, I think we can't just avoid the fact that there are differences. And
I think if he was completely wrong, there's no way he would have elevated to.
Yeah.
I think he said was bullshit. There's a lot of bullshitters out there who never make that large because they're not hitting on this common theme that is something that is very relevant at the moment. And I think in anything that rises to the top, there's always some element of truth in it. It doesn't mean that it's universal, 100% objective fact, but I think there's some element of truth in anything that becomes that makes it to
that level.
To the point where almost everybody, if you said the name Jordan Peterson,
They'll know,
almost everybody
have a,
who he is.
They'll either usually have a viewpoint of some view,
or they'll be familiar with something that
what he does.
Yep.
Yeah. That's the thing that gets me. Is like I mean, I'm much less of a fan than I used to be. A fan, if that's the wrong word, but I would say I support him less than I used to. I would still say I support him though. But it's like, you get the average person, and any time he's brought up, it's like people instantly have the knee-jerk bad reaction though. And it's just like there's no, and I'll ask people like, okay, why? And they don't know. They don't have there's no reason.
Because they're largely in or out on the emotional appeal aspect. And it's very, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not being judgmental of it. It's very hard to fight that emotional resistance to somebody that you fundamentally disagree with. But like for example, I will, like I said before, I listen to Sam Harris's podcast, which I very much like. I also watch Jordan Peterson YouTube videos. If I'm gonna listen to one, I will try to also go completely on the other side. Just because if I start going too far down that one very heavily skewed path, I know that it's very easy to become indoctrinated, like you said.
Like, I remember last night, we were at dinner, and someone said something that I think, I personally think was racist towards white people. And it's just they were talking about how someone had success, and they were talking about how they basically manipulated the media and everyone into giving them success.
Yeah.
And then they finish it off by saying, I guess you can do anything when you're white. And it's just like, that was intensely frustrating to me, because it's like, I feel like,
well, that's the dangerous conclusion. Like there's a definite jump from the other acknowledged points to boom, that end point.
Yeah, it's just like that was. But then I noticed the thing that I found interesting was I immediately had the urge to go and watch Jordan Peterson talk about white privilege.
Yeah,
and
well, and I think that's partly why. I think people are having these conversations, probably arguments, and everybody's looking for ammo to bring to the war. It's just this is a verbal war.
Yes.
So once someone tells you something, it's like, and the internet makes so accessible, I can find some
Argument.
highly valued opinion, and then I can use that and bring that to the next gunfight. It's like, I'm going to bring a tank when you're bringing a car.
Yeah.
Like, so, again, like, I think that's the fundamental human root of why these things become viral.
Did you ever have trouble, like, holding yourself back in terms of that? Like, when someone... Like, I still have trouble with it in terms of, like, fitness or in terms of anything politics related. Like, whenever anyone says, like, something frankly sexist towards men or sexist or racist against white men, it's just like, I find it commonly like, fuck's sake. Or they say something that I know is just wrong in any regard, whether that be fitness or whatever.
Of course, I have my own views. Of course, I'm fucking human too. I get frustrated. I get annoyed. I get all of those things. But I always do my best to give everybody a chance. So if someone, I'm not going to be the person who goes out and engages that person and to start a fight with them. But if they try to engage me, I will ask a lot of questions so I completely understand them. And then basically the choices I make, I have a choice. Everybody has a choice of whether they're going to engage and how much they're going to engage. And for me, as soon as it becomes an argument, I'm done, because then there's nothing's happening at that point.
Yeah.
We're just fighting to win.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's just a lot of questions, and I want to get to what their basement view of the issue is, and then I try to have a conversation about it. And if I pose a question that visibly agitates them, and then I know we're not having a reasonable conversation anymore.
Because now it's, I want to win, you want to win. Like, I think I told you about this. I met a white supremacist at a party. Like, he called himself a white supremacist. And it was like, I was fascinated by it. Because, like, how can you get to that sort of conclusion? And I was just asking him all these questions. Like, what led you to this? Like, why do you think this is real? Blah, blah, blah. Like, all that sort of stuff. And I'm just trying to, like, we sat down for like an hour just talking about it. Like, and I was just like, how did you get here? And I was just trying to understand how on earth someone can reach that conclusion. And like, he gave me a bunch of names, and he was like, "Oh, these people, blah blah blah. Like, this is the guy that I follow."
I think this is an important thing to uniting point between someone who also might have the most opposite view of an issue that you do, and it's that everybody got there. There's usually a reason everybody arrived at their current outlook on the world, and it's because that person either spoke to them on a level, or that made sense to them in the context of their life experience, to where they adopted that view and said, this is how the world is. And I'm not saying it's easy to do, but I think the best opportunity is to have the conversation with those people, rather than, because if you right from the outset say that person has the complete opposite view of me, I'm gonna meet fire with fire. How's there ever opportunity to resolve anything? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it just seems like everybody's trying to make sense of all of this shit.
Yeah.
And if you have a repeated occurrence, it's because you can't go into something assuming that everybody went through the same exact life experience as you.
Yeah.
Because how you got to where you are is because largely of your life experience, your upbringing, all your family life, your parents. So I can understand how people can have very out there views.
Yeah.
If you feel left behind, or if you feel that there's been an injustice, you're trying to make sense of it, and it's almost like saying everybody goes to a basketball game plays a basketball game just for the experience, and they're okay with losing. I don't think that's true. Like, if we've agreed that the view of success in life is to be wealthy, to have a lot of social status, to have nice things, to be spiritually whole, to have a family, then that sets the grounds for people to compete. And
Because then we
people
had the rules set, and we sort of say, okay, this is generally what we agree on. These are the things that we actually value.
But here's the thing: you flatten the line, and then guess what you have?
Echo chamber.
You arrive at communism, socialism,
Right. Yeah.
and everybody's running from that. So it's like I think there's these, there's definite challenges. Those are the challenges of social life and the emotional life of being a human. Is like, it's very hard. It's just like, and this gets into a whole other subsection, but where I think it relates is, it's why I have trouble definitively saying there is or is not a God. It's the same reason why I have a clear line in the sand of I am left wing or right wing. It's I think people approach the problem. There are people on both sides who are coming at it logically, and you can see how they arrive there. So unless everybody gets raised in this one nursery and we put the world in a bubble and everybody has a unified experience, I don't think we're ever going to have a unified view. And even still then, brain development is different, personality characteristics are different. What's going to emerge is there's going to be people who try to cheat the system and people who want to follow the rules. It's going to happen.
And do you feel like we just need to... It would probably be better if we just reduce the amount of arguing that's going on, not the amount of conversation.
I think the only place I've arrived at is making the attempt. I will always do my best to make the attempt to hear somebody out. Obviously, unless they're approaching it, with here's a knife, adopt my view, or I'm going to kill you. That's much harder to just hear them out. But
what about when someone personally, I had someone in the gym the other day, because I do some unconventional things in the gym, like lifting shoes on leg press, but if you think about it, it has pretty good rationale. Obviously, increased depth makes my hips feel better, stable platform, why not? And also bands, so bands on the leg press as well. Maybe it looks a bit over the top for some people, but I think it has solid rationale. And then I had someone question it, and then it instantly became very defensive and very sort of like, well, how do you have that? They didn't have rationale to argue against it. They just said why are you using... It wasn't like a genuine why. It was like a...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why are you doing something dumb?
Yeah. Wasn't over the top. And it's like, me and this person have gone back and forth repeatedly, criticizing what each other does. And we're very, very, very hostile in regards to each other's, especially in the gym. Because, for instance, they don't deload, and I've said repeatedly, you should probably deload. And then they've asked me why, and I'm like, injuries. And they're just like, how can, for instance, they said, how can what I do in the gym affect my likelihood of an acute injury, like rolling my ankle?
So I think the only point you actually have opportunity to make a difference is if you let that person come around and start asking you, rather than engaging. Because it's also, you can look at it this way and say no, or what they should know. Just like it's not their job to come up and tell you what they think you should know and what you're doing wrong. It's not your job to try to rectify them either. So I think the only point you actually have an opportunity of making a real difference is if they're coming up to you and asking. That's why I don't blindly give people advice or tell them what I think they need to think unless they come to me and they're genuinely asking, hey, some help, can you help me? And it's partly an expense of my time and energy. Is
why would you waste it if it's just going to be wasted?
Right. I am not looking for opportunities to get in arguments and fights throughout the day. I'm just not. I'm not that angry or frustrated of a person, and I'm not looking to just drop it off on somebody else when I'm frustrated.
I feel like, I think it's turning now, but I definitely think I had a very pessimistic view of the world, and that made me want to get in the arguments and the fights.
Yep.
And then, especially around things like obesity, around all the political shit, it's like so much of it. It was just like, and I mean, I still feel that way. It's still like I still want, because I think anything to do with fitness, it's like, it's just rampant with BS that doesn't work, and then it's so inefficient, and then it's literally causing obesity, and it's just like, you know, like, it's just, there's so much stuff there. And I find it very difficult to hold myself back in terms of that. Like, someone will say something, like, say, I'm hanging out with a bunch of people, and then someone says, oh, I just wish I could lose weight. And then they say something about how they're trying to lose weight, and then it's like, for me to not intervene there, I find it so difficult. It's just like, okay, all I need to tell them is, hey, calories in, calories out. I can cite you a billion studies that show that's true.
So what I'll say to that is, again, I think it comes down to making the attempt.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to try, but if you find that you're just confronting a wall, then I think continuing to try to break through their wall is probably not a good investment of time. But I do think, you know, it's definitely worthwhile to try to put out a good message that is backed by something more than just how you feel about something, and you can tie it to at least some type of logical path that you've followed to arrive there. I don't think those things are a waste of time. Then if no one talked about it, then nothing would happen, but or there'd be no progression of knowledge. So yeah, I think the moment you give up trying is just apathy, and then apathy is a pretty dangerous place.
And that's the thing. I find it mainly frustrating with fitness. It's just like the rules are so simple, and the rules are so like.
And I will go back to what I referenced before, and this is something that I think, you know, one of the things that's interesting about owning a business, especially in supplements, where it's not, I think the general meat of the bell curve is not that educated on supplements. It's what to do with the frustration that people are being lied to, and they're wanting to be lied to. And I think you can look at it and get angry and frustrated, or you can look at it and see the opportunity in making a difference, a change. And the more I get educated in all of these fields, it's definitely, and I've seen it happen, and there's been points where I've felt that I've done it, and I've realized it and tried to make a change. It's easy to become elitist and say, oh, I have this knowledge, I'm right, you're wrong, you're an idiot. Like, that's a very quick, you know, easy knee-jerk reaction to have. But then if you realize that, like, who are you really benefiting if maybe you do have the right answer, but you can only tell it to yourself and you can't communicate that? What benefit do you have other than inflating your ego?
Yeah, that's exactly true. I feel like I've definitely been in that place.
Yeah, I mean, I've felt that at points too, and then it's made me realize, oh shit, I need to work on this, because I'm not actually. There's
no point.
Not actually
just convincing yourself, and even if you have all the knowledge in the world, it's like, okay, maybe someone knows something you don't, or maybe someone
right, or they
they're not
can
listen
actually
to
help
you.
your knowledge, or they can help your understanding by
they can
the
see
way
where they can even show you the holes by way of knowing, like, okay, what are the common questions they actually have, not just what you think they have.
Yep.
Like.
So I am very interested in seeing where people are approaching the problem from. I think the hardest part and the biggest limitation is it is exhausting because it's very emotionally expensive and time expensive. So there's no way that I can have a conversation like that with every person that would come up to me. But those are the ones that I want to have, rather than just be on a pulpit or like on, you know, my profile and just trying to disseminate fact. Like, I'd much rather have the conversation with the individual where they can take away something that they've learned at their level of understanding, rather than just try to have this mass consumed, watered down message. Yes. However, there is a piece to that if you just give up, you miss it in business in particular. So like, I watched the things like, you know, the stuff that came out with Bang, and then the Blackstone lab stuff with the indictments, and realize like there are these massively successful companies out there that are taking advantage of people.
What was the general gist of that?
The what?
What was the general gist of the Bang and the Blackstone Labs thing?
So the new lawsuit with Bang is that it doesn't contain any creatine, and I don't think it has any branched chains. It's basically just caffeine.
Oh.
Like all of stuff is
And
basically
was
lies.
that so they were saying it contained that, but it didn't.
Oh yeah, yeah, like super creatine or something, and apparently it doesn't have any of that in it. They tested it, and it has none of that. And then Blackstone was that they were selling designer steroids, which they were, and they knew they were.
Really?
Uh,
So they
and yeah,
what the fuck? Was it like Psalms they were
So-
selling or some shit, or?
no, like orally active anabolics that just
Right.
weren't under the scheduling of the what the DEA or the FDA had scheduled.
Right.
Um,
So they just figured a way to get around the law.
Yeah, I mean, and through different chemical changes, it's very hard for legislation to cover everything
Yeah.
that chemistry can create, unless the legislators were chemists too. So I think giving up on it is acceptance in saying it's always going to be this way, and then it removes the option for people to actually have something out there that's legitimate. It's
Yeah.
almost like if you give up and say it's all just scoundrels, well then guess what? The scoundrels take over.
Yeah. Like there needs to be that, like, even if it's always going to be smaller because it's not sexy, like
Yeah.
evidence-based fitness, it's like there needs to be that. If we don't exist because we give up, well, the fuck is the point then? Like, where can people go? Are they going to go
Well-
to Simeon Panda? Like, if he's all that does exist, like,
It also opens up the challenge of, okay, well, how can I find this middle ground where these companies are doing something that's clearly effective in their marketing, and it's bringing them into bullshit. What if you can replicate a similar marketing model but bring them into legitimacy? You see what I mean?
yeah.
So find
Like,
the
for instance, Jeff
principle.
Nippard, like, he's one of the few people
Yeah.
who's done it fantastically.
Exactly.
And it's like, obviously it can be done.
Right. So there are examples of people who have made it to a high level and haven't lost their entire morals and direction and principles. So it is achievable. And I think even if you have to use some tactics that the viral or clickbaity things do, but you get them into something legitimate, that's way better than just giving up, walking away,
Yeah.
and having the industry take swamped with becoming a swamp.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that's probably something that I should focus on more, because I think I focus a lot on, fuck, there's all this bullshit. And then it's like, okay, yep, cool. And what? Like, what are you going to do about it? And I think I was talking to Ryan Solomon. He's like he works with Revive Stronger. We were talking about the fact that, like, if we just introduce marketing to evidence-based fitness, like, for instance, if you take a company like 3DMJ and you give them amazing marketing, like, they'd fucking crush it. And it's just like, now that's being shown, like, that's what they're doing, and it's working. And it's just like, that's the cool thing. I think you guys are doing it with Denovo. It's just like, just taking a legitimate product and then marketing correctly, which is like,
Yep.
if that can one day be like the majority of what people have and consume, would be fantastic.
Well, I think the one core principle that I've arrived at is if you're going to be effective, you have to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you have to manipulate them. It just means you have to work on meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
And that's a work in progress for me, and that's, I think, something that we're working on doing. And again, I'll say that's the difference between giving up and continuing to try. Is like, I don't know. I truly believe, and this probably is just something that has bled over from the way we started the conversation. Of like, I could easily just give up on not using an ingredient, and then never try to put something to market.
Yeah.
And try to innovate something and
But
say
it's like-
everybody's figured everything out. All the problems have been solved. Every innovation and development that can be done with supplements has been done.
Yeah.
I like the challenge because it's an intellectual challenge, and it's never wasted because I always learn more.
Yeah. And then it's like, if you, especially with something like supplements, it's like, there's so many things that people don't know, and it's like, there's always more, like, there's bigger interactions we can discover, blah, 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 like, and then, like, seeing that, and then being the first one to do that, it's like, that, I think, even, like, like financially that would be highly beneficial, but obviously it's not easy. Like it's not like to find that the nitrate. It's like that wasn't. It's like to get that you had to go through all those different things, and then it had a benefit.
Here's it's weird because I see myself in the beginner consumer, and it feels very much like giving up on trying would be giving up on myself, because I know that there's people out there that are curious. I know people demand and want legitimate stuff.
Yeah.
That's what started me doing this in the first place. So if it either becomes impure or it's given up on, I just don't feel right giving up on that version of myself. And I think I realize every time I learn something, or I'd say like, oh, I had that dumb thought in the past before too. Like I was at that level of understanding. So I think not ever losing where I've been, it's a good segue to go back and try to take that understanding and see how I can make that make sense to someone who doesn't even know any level of organic chemistry. And that's hard, and I struggle to do it, and I'm still struggling to do it.
Well, I think it's a difficult challenge, but a necessary one. Like,
yeah,
I think it's everything in fitness. It's like if you can think back to before you knew like what a carbohydrate was, it's like that is pretty valuable, because then it's like, okay, people hear carbs and they think just pasta is a carb, or whatever. Like, that's all there, or like. Yeah, they think, oh, carbs are bad, carbs are good. And it's very like, they don't know anything. And then being able to go back to that and somehow take that.
That's the hardest part of it, is that it comes down to the time thing. Is like most people don't want to go along for that entire ride of you arriving at the logical endpoint of how you arrive there. They just want, is it good or is it bad? And I think that's where I struggle the most, is like, people tend to want black and white so then they can move on with their day. And I always want to give people the answer they ask for, not the answer that they want to hear.
Right. Yeah, so then it's like you actually give them it probably takes longer and it's harder, but I'd say even long term, it's like, because then you do get the more educated people, and if they see you say something black and white, it's like they can kind of say like, okay, that might turn that crowd off. And it's like, especially with Denovo, that's probably the majority of the market. Like a lot of the people who currently love Denovo are people who are very educated. So it's like,
yeah, I think we get a little bit of a mix. I'd like to think that, but at the same time, it also makes me realize that if we depend upon that and we only rely upon that, it's not a scalable business. So again, it goes back to the same thing, is finding a way to actually broaden beyond, okay, well, this it doesn't mean we're going to leave behind educated people. It's just finding a way to
help expand it
and make the message so it doesn't turn off people who aren't as educated.
Yes. Yeah.
Without losing
they don't
its
just
value.
see this like spray of words and they're like, what the fuck does any of that mean? And being able to sort of, it's like pitching it at the right level in terms of that is going to be I think it's probably going to be quite a challenge, but I think the more you guys do it, the easier it'll get. And it's like the kind of stuff where like people are getting very good at taking things in fitness and making them not basic, but making them understandable. And because that's like the core of it, pretty much. It's like if someone can understand it, they can do it usually. So it's like that's, I think, what we have to do.
Yeah, I think it was a little more stubborn in the past, and now I'm just coming around and realizing that we can't rest on the fact that people are just going to realize that we're just more legitimate because we are, and we're trying, and we're making a concerted effort towards that.
Yeah,
it's
people need to know. It's like just because the work is good. Oh, have you read Ryan Holiday's Perennial Seller? It's like, just because your work is good does not mean it will be heard or should be heard.
Yep.
It's like, good
Yep.
work does not just magically get a market. It's like, they can be the best products in the world and even the best prices in the world or whatever. It's like, whatever, by any standard, it's the best product in the world, but if no one knows about it and no one can see why it's the best product in the world, then it's very difficult to do so, especially when you're surrounded by marketing giants that just make shitty products, but people think they work because they have good marketing. So it's like, I guess that's the dilemma, which I feel like is the majority of fitness. But I guess it's like it's the people who are the best at marketing who are winning. And what I want to know is maybe it's going to take us longer, as us meaning like evidence-based fitness, longer to get to the point where we're as good at marketing, because maybe we focus on the other stuff and the other people did like 20% of their knowledge about fitness and then they did 80% marketing. So it's like they've made them, and maybe we've done 80-20. So it's like, that's the thing. Do we have to reduce our knowledge of fitness or reduce the focus on that? I don't know, like, because I mean there is people in the middle, like Jeff Nabod's a great example. Like, he's fantastic at marketing, but then also pretty good at the evidence-based side. It's like he does good justice to that. So it's like, that's the thing.
Well, I think the only way it's going to continue to improve, and the reason it has improved so much, is because the market has grown. So as long as the market grows, it's going to spur off more ability for all the niches to survive, and then there will always be, I think the biggest are always going to be the ones with the best marketing, because they will reach the largest audience, but it won't mean that only they can survive then, because the market grows and it allows just like Lamborghini doesn't need to be the biggest car producer in the world. They're not, but they have a market because the market's big enough. So when the market, everybody drives a car, which means there's going to be people on the far end of the bell curve
who want Lamborghinis.
Who want Lamborghinis, they can afford them, and they could sell to, let's say, 200 people a year and
make profit,
have a feasible business.
Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like with so many of these problems, it's sort of like we kind of know the solution, but it's just the like nuance of implementing that. It's like, and getting companies to do that. Like, I mean, I think it's like, maybe it's just because the idiocy at the top is so obvious to the people in evidence-based. It's like we see so many issues, but when you get into it, it's like when I was first getting into fitness, I didn't see any of the issues. And it's like people are just trying to sell products at the end of the day, and they're just trying to make a feasible business.
I think, one of the challenges that needs to be acknowledged is that you have to, just the act of starting a business means you are signing on for a challenge that never ends unless the business ends. And it's really choosing which challenge you're signing on for. If you're saying our challenge is to make as much money as we can, that's a very different challenge than saying we're trying to, educate, enlighten, and provide value. And the problem is that life changes from 10 to 20 to 20 to 30 to 30 to 40, and people's priorities, they start having families. As businesses grow, they have changes throughout their lifespan, where if a board comes in, a lot of different things are going to drive decision making than if it's just a startup. So I think the enormous challenge of it all can't just be looked in this isolated facet of what is best for the consumer. And well, in an idealistic world, it would. It's also the consideration that I have only realized because I've owned a business for 8 years, is that the challenge and the investment of continuing to invest and emotionally prioritize that challenge grows as the business grows. And I think that's one fundamental difficulty or difference that you see in businesses is you can start and be a business that starts out very purist and then sells out. Because not everybody can be in startup phase for their entire life, life span of a company. Not everybody. Well, if you look at Shark Tank, or the reason people go on there and pitch or get investors and sell to investors, it's because they need to feed their family. Like, you can't always justify being a scrounging entrepreneur in a startup for your entire life, because otherwise you will literally grind yourself into a pulp just to hear people complain and ask you for more.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, at the end of the day, the businesses and I mean, that's the thing with these sort of problems, is like, it's always in an ideal world. It's like, in an ideal world, like,
nothing we've talked about today is not complex. Every single thing can be splintered down to super fine hairs, and
there's details we can't know.
Yep. And not immediately, and not as fast as you want to. Just like when you first started, you probably wanted to know the perfect diet and the perfect training program.
and it's just the fact of the context behind that, and the fact that we don't even know all the context, and we don't know the variables involved. We don't know all the variables involved, and it's just like,
so funny enough, and that is a Jordan Peterson principle. I do think is very accurate, and I think is good and appropriate for people. Is you have to commit to something, like you do, and I think that's absolutely true in business and in work professionally. Like, imagine if every week you're trying to change your career.
Yeah.
Never going to get or keep a job.
It's like with creatine. It's like, if people change their opinion on creatine every week, it's like, okay, there's one study. Okay, fuck creatine. Actually, no, it's all right. Like, that wouldn't really.
All you end up in is chaos and confusion.
Yeah.
You just can't stay there in life. You can't. It's way too anxiety inducing.
Yeah. And unproductive, and just like, it doesn't really cause anything. But yeah. Should we finish off here? Where can people find you? Do you have any upcoming products you want people to know about? Or everything Ben Esgro.
So I do have speaking of chaos, I do have my very erratic and non-linear Instagram profile, which is just that, Ben Esgro. Definitely follow our Denovo Subs Instagram page too. We have quite a bit coming out this year. A lot of stuff that's being finalized. We have a new flavor of Ignite coming out, which is our pre-workout. We have a new flavor of Utopia coming out first. We have a lot of new stock coming back for those products. Obviously, if people haven't seen the rebrand and all the new labels, they're beautiful, so you will see them soon if you haven't seen them yet. We have that creatine product I was talking about coming out. We have a couple really cool projects coming out later in the year that I'm just finishing up now, that I'm not going to talk about too much because I don't want to give them away. But they are in basically making new categories in the field, which I had wanted to do for a long time, and found some ways to do it, which I'm really excited about, and hoping people will be excited about them too. And yeah, I mean, that's it for now. I will continue to do more chemistry projects as I can, because I'm finishing this year in the summer, and it'll open up a little more free time. So
thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Student Side Hustle. I would appreciate so much if you would leave a review if you'd like to hear more of what I'm saying. Then I would love if you would follow me on Instagram or check out my other social media, all linked in the show notes. And again, I would just like to say thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful evening and study hard.